Grab your gas masks, wargamers, because we're watching a brush fire a couple of miles off. Wind's blowing in the wrong direction, so I think we're going to be okay. The big thing is, of course, longtime fans know I got a lot of birds I got to worry about, so if the smoke starts getting too bad, if you start hearing the sirens, we may have to cut this short and finish it later. That's fine. Speaking of birds, one of them decided that she loved my copy of William Sylvester's Solo Wargaming Guide, the price we pay. Things are getting a little out of hand here at the Joy of Wargaming. We're having so much fun, it's hard to keep track of it all. So to that end, I went out and bought this adorable Wargaming journal. It's not a diary, it's a journal, and I bought the flashy gold one because, you know, I like a little bling in my life. Separated out by the campaigns that we're running. So far, I've got, of course, the Adventures of the Black Raven. I've got notes on the various battles that we fought. So into 2021, we're going to keep a much better record. I can throw in the single sheets of rules that I purchase over the course, except I keep buying them from British people who have very odd ideas about how big paper should be. They don't quite fit, but at least I got them organized a little bit better, so that's not so bad. And then, of course, the big mamma jamma. Now, the Trojan Empire Wars that I'm umpiring for a group of friends, that's largely going to be digital. TrojanWar.blogspot.com. That's TROSSIAN. But for my solo stuff, this is what I largely do in the wee small hours of the night after the family has gone to bed and the birds are down, and I get a little bit of peace and quiet, those rare moments. We're using William Sylvester's Solo Wargaming Guide, and eventually we're leading up to big battles. Now, in the last video, what you saw was a map that looks something like this. And this is a die drop map with a whole bunch of notes that everything's been scratched out and kind of arrows every which way. This is the initial phase, and I thought, you know, I really need to clean this up. So since last we talked, I went ahead and made up some prettier maps. I threw some names on here. The big forest that kind of divides these two nations of Sinistrea and Dextromania. It's called the Deep Hollow. I used a random name generator that gave me names for all of the towns and cities. We kept Forthright City. Anytime I declare something has happened, it's set in stone. I can change things up until it goes into the actual journal, and then we're done. So I gave we got the Froghome Forest up here. We've got the Spearhead Mountains that kind of jab like a spear into the heart of Sinistrea. The Evernorth Ocean, it's on the north side, just made sense. And then we got a couple of rivers here. The North Runner River and the, what is this one over here? The Big Windy. It looks like Windy, but it's the Big Windy. And one of the reasons I did this is because, one, it gives me a little bit more character, but also I went through and I checked the numbers, I checked the math on the forces that each of the two kings have available, and just made a simple timeline of what's going on. So on the first, King Eastern Morningtide, the third, mobilizes his army, and they cross the frontier on the 10th, as we did last time. Now, in the last video, we had them crossing on the 10th. So basically, the first 2 weeks of October were unseasonably warm, what back in the Midwest we used to call an Indian summer. So we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is too bad, because now that I've got town names, all of the regiments that were raised in, say, Autumn Front, are now designated the first, or the second, or the third. Let's see if we can fix the lighting. There we go. The third Autumn Front. There were a couple of scattered cities that had individual companies. It takes 5 companies to make a regiment. So I threw those companies together and made the West Guard. They came from all the western towns. Likewise down here, Army Group 2. Now, for those of you that are just joining us, here's the strategic situation. The army of Dextromania has created 2 large armies. The first one has crossed the frontier and has invested themselves at Palestead. The siege only lasted a couple of days. This is a frontier town. It's right on the border. Their sympathies and loyalties are divided. Looking back at it, it makes sense that Palestead would not put up too big a fight. All they have is a local militia. They're getting jammed by we can flip back, you know, a whole lot of guys, an army of several thousand individuals. I can't remember what the total is here. We've got 2, 4, 6 foot, so that's going to be 4,500, an army of 4,500 plus 1,500 cavalry plus 2 batteries of cannons. Maybe not a large army by some standards, but for the sake of a wargaming campaign, it's going to work out nicely. They have a follow-on army that has left Autumn Front and is now marching for the frontier as well. So even if this first army doesn't fare well, it's going to be a massive 1-2 punch at Leftopolis. For their part, recognizing their numerical inferiority, the leader of old Leftopia here, the Sinistrians, now his name is King Westley Dusk VII. He has split his forces, oddly enough, and sent one force here to fight a delaying action and hold as long as possible. He's got a second force down here at Talberg, and they're going to march for the relatively undefended Fourth Right City. There's just a local militia of about 300 people. So things are going to get really interesting once we start crunching the numbers and looking at the timing on this. Before we do that, we need to establish a couple of things about these armies. One of the big factors you have to worry about is leadership in a situation like this, and one of the ways that William Sylvester recommends you deal with that is with a little trait called CCR, or Commander Competency Rating. A number 1 through 6, with 1 being a bloody idiot and 6 being a superb commander. To personalize things a little bit more and to get more invested in what's about to happen, I went ahead and named the leaders of these 2 army groups. Now, the rules in the book are meant to generate the tabletop battles. So the rules assume that you're going to need to know what happens to the tabletop generals. The rules that I'm using, 2x2 Napoleonics, you're only ever really going to have one headquarters on the table at a time, particularly with such small armies as these. The Army Group 1 here, you're looking at, when I calculated it out, it's only about 20 AP. The battles that, like if you're just going to fight a one-off, it would be 40 AP worth of troops. One other thing to point out. The smaller cities, kind of on the periphery here, in each of these nations, doesn't commit a full regiment. They just don't have the manpower for that. They commit anywhere from 1 to 4 companies. So what I did is I had the companies muster and join forces and kind of reorganize so that we've got a couple of regiments here, like the, who do we have here? The West Guard is composed of troops from a lot of different cities, towns and villages. And likewise down here you've got the Righteous Guard and the Arrowhorn Guard. Those are actually cavalry units. Which are the ones? Oh, the King's Combined is a heavy foot unit. Veterans from, maybe retired guys from those smaller towns. And I designated them as heavy foot. Pretty much everybody else is foot for the Dextran Army. I named the leader of Army Group 1, the Jab, Johann von Skar, and the General Gerald von Kriegspiel. He's the commanding Army Group 2. Now, normally you could roll a 1d6. That would give you a flat, even distribution. You'd have just as many terrible commanders as you have average commanders. And I think I'd like a little bit more of a bell curve to this. So what I'm going to do is roll 2d6, and I'm going to divide by 2, drop the fractions. That's going to give me, drop all fractions? Yeah, we'll drop all fractions. That way our Wellingtons and Napoleons will be relatively rare. You're only going to get those on boxcars. So Johann von Skar here has a rating of, 1. So what I'm going to do, rather than simply rolling 2d6 and dividing by 2, I've got a simple little chart here that I just whipped off the top of my head that means if I roll snake eyes, you get a 1. If I roll boxcars, you get a 6. And kind of an even distribution, tilted a little bit more heavily towards competent commanders. You don't rise to be the main general without having some kind of competency. So for Johann von Skar, we're going to roll a 3, and that means he is going to have a competency of 2. Very interesting. Gerald von Kriegspiel is going to have a competency of 7, which will give him a 4. So these are the cannon fodder. It looks like the Dextran King has said, look, you idiot, go ahead and get yourself killed, and then good old Jerry, the wargamer here, is going to clean up your mess. On the other side of the frontier, we've got William Brutors, General William Brutors, who has a leadership of 5, and Evan Stevens, General Evan Stevens, a 9 gives him a competency of 4. So the King of Sinestrea has decided to put his better commander to the 4. Hold him, hold him, hold him. You don't have to be a genius to take a city with an unopposed army. So now we have fleshed out our strategic situation even more, with even more detail. We've got a really good commander going up against a guy who's not so hot. He must be like a political appointee. And the best commander has been completely duped. The fog of war has him marching north when he should probably be heading south. Bear in mind, this is a long way from Talberg to Forthright City. It's going to be a race to see if that second army can get there in time. And that race is going to depend on something very important. By which I mean the weather. A lot of war games don't really factor this in, but we're going to try to be as detailed as we possibly can without driving ourselves crazy. Fortunately, Mr. Sylvester makes it easy on us. He's got a sample weather chart. And so we're going to roll on this starting on the 16th. And it's very simple. It's October, so you roll a 2d6. And on a 5, you get, in October, clear skies. Now, as you can see, I'm not too worried about the fact that we didn't have foul weather in the first couple of weeks, because it's going to be a fairly rare event that happens. But now we've established that on the 16th, when the two armies that are the lead elements are starting to kind of jockey for position, the battle's going to be fought on the 16th, or on the 17th. So let's go ahead and right now, we'll go ahead and declare that on the 17th, the weather that is encountered that morning, as you can see, is 11. And that 11 in October is going to be black, which is heavy rain. So unfortunately here, between Leftopolis and Palestead, and we can kind of zero in on this a little bit more. You've got two armies that are both marching along the unimproved road, and they're jockeying for position. Well, the heavy rain is very interesting. What does that mean? Well, it means that everything's going to get slowed down. In fact, let's go ahead and check the rules here real quick. We know we're dealing with this area right here, but what I wanted to do was really zoom in, and I'm going to kick back over to my rough patch. Once I get my photocopier working, we'll make more copies of this. We can really mark it up with this kind of fine-grained analysis, where you see that on the 17th, the invasion army was here, and on the 18th here, so the 19th, it's going to be somewhere within this, like, 10 miles. And the actual direction the armies meet could be anywhere along here. We'll see that in the video coming up here in a little bit. But we have 4 armies to track, don't we? The Army Group 2 is going to travel for 2 days at half speed, but they're on improved roads, so they can actually make it a quarter of an inch, 3/4 of an inch. So on the 18th, that's where we wind up. They're within 10 miles, and now, finally, on the 19th, Army Group North has to give battle somewhere on the outskirts of Leftopolis, which is going to inform our tactical game. The 17th, and then again on the 18th, it takes a day, so unfortunately, this army group down here is also slowed down, so it doesn't really buy them as much time as you might hope. That siege is going to be the big one. But again, Leftopolis is the capital. You can't let that go without a siege. So in our next video, we are going to roll for the weather on the night. Well, actually, let's just do it now. So the weather is going to be clear, sunny skies, and there'll be a little bit of jockeying for position here. And we'll take a look at what that battle is going to look like in the next video. In the meantime, thanks for going on this solo wargaming journey with me. I think we all can agree that having this order of battle ready and organically generating even an unfair fight such as this, you've only got 5 units versus twice that number. You've got a much more competent commander here, so that'll factor into our terrain. And once the battle is over, we'll have to figure out what decisions those 2 commanders make. But that's a video for another day. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm praying for you.